The particulars are that on the 29th December 2021, at Kabete in Dagoreti Sub-County within Nairobi County, murdered Miriam Wangari. The accused pleaded not guilty to the charge. However, following successful plea negotiations with the state, the accused pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter, contrary to Section 202, as read in Section 205. He subsequently signed a plea agreement on 2nd September 2025. The accused was therefore charged with the offence of manslaughter and convicted accordingly. Having read that now, I want just to read the analysis or the finding of this court. Okay, from paragraph 22. The court also received victim impact statements. Sarah Wanjema, the deceased sister, spoke of the profound emotional and physical toll the death has inflicted upon the family, including the failing health of their parents. She lamented that only partial remains had been recovered and pleaded for disclosure of the missing body parts so that the family may achieve closure. Christopher Minor, the deceased son, described his mother as the pillar of the family and expressed anguish at her violent death and dismemberment. He recounted that the accused had been trusted and assisted by the family and questioned why he turned against the deceased. He stated that the family continues to live in fear and grief and urged the court to ensure justice is done. I have considered the pre-sentence report on record. The penal section for the offence of manslaughter is found under Section 205, and it states that any person who commits the felony of manslaughter is liable to imprisonment for life. The Court of Appeal in Thomas Mwambu versus Republic 2017 cited the decision of the Supreme Court of India in Ulster Anthony Pereira versus the state, where the court held as follows. Sentencing is an important task in the matter of crime. One of the prime objectives of the criminal law is imposition of appropriate, adequate, just and proportionate sentence commensurate with the nature and gravity of crime and the manner in which the crime is done. There is no straitjacket formula for sentencing an accused person on proof of crime. The courts have evolved certain principles. Twin objective of sentencing policy is deterrence and correction. What sentence would meet the ends of justice depends on the facts and circumstances of each case, and the court must keep in mind the gravity of the crime, motive for the crime, nature of the offense, and all other attendant circumstances. The principle of proportionality in sentencing a crime doer is well entrenched in criminal jurisprudence. As a matter of law, proportion between crime and punishment bears most relevant influence in determination of sentencing the crime doer. The court has to take into consideration all aspects, including social interest and consciousness of the society, for award of appropriate sentence. In Charom Bumbao Bubudu versus Republic 2011, the court further held, the law is that sentence imposed on an accused person must be commensurate in the moral blame, worthiness of the offender, and that it is thus not proper exercise for the court to fail to look at the facts and circumstances of the case in the entirety before setting for any given sentence. In the instant case, the deceased Miriam Wangari was last seen alive in circumstances placing her within the control and proximity of the accused, who occupied a position of trust as her employee and driver. Thereafter, she vanished, and what followed was not merely the concealment of death, but a sequence of acts displaying extreme disregard for human dignity. The court is satisfied that the accused not only caused her death, but undertook deliberate and calculated steps to dismember her body and scatter her remains in order to evade detection. The most disturbing feature of this case is the treatment of the deceased body. The evidence establishes that the body was dismembered into separate parts and disposed of in different locations. Only some parts were recovered, while crucial parts, including the head and torso, have never been found. The nature of the injuries and the condition of the remains demonstrate a gruesome and methodical dismemberment. This was not a single act done in haste, but a prolonged and deliberate process requiring time, physical effort, and a conscious decision to mutilate the body. Such conduct goes far beyond what might be described as post-offense panic. It reflects calculated attempts to obliterate the deceased's identity, frustrate investigations, and deny the family the dignity of a burial. The court must emphasize that the mutilation of a body represents one of the gravest forms of post-homicide conduct known to the law. It violates not only the sanctity of life, but also the dignity owed to the dead. The scattering of the remains meant that the deceased family were forced to confront the horror of recovering isolated body parts rather than the body of their loved one. To date, the absence of the head, the torso, the arms, and the other leg continues to deny them closure. The psychological cruelty inherent in this state of uncertainty constitutes a serious aggravating factor. The aggravation is compounded by the accused's conduct immediately after the killing. The evidence shows that he retained the deceased's mobile phone and appropriated her money. Telecommunications record confirmed that her handset was subsequently used with his SIM card, and the device was recovered from his person upon arrest. This demonstrates that even after causing her death, the accused exploited the deceased property for his own benefit. Such conduct aggravates culpability as it reveals opportunistic gain arising directly from the offense. The court further finds that there were persistent and deliberate attempts to conceal evidence. This included the dismemberment itself, the dispersal of the body parts, the retention and attempted destruction of the accused phone, and the failure to disclose the whereabouts of the missing remains. These actions were not momentary lapses, but formed a sustained pattern of concealment. They show that the deceased's conduct after the killing was purposeful and directed towards avoiding accountability. In sentencing, the court has considered the plea of guilty, the mitigation tendered, the period spent in custody, and the personal circumstances of the accused. The court accepts that the plea spared the deceased family the ordeal of a lengthy trial and also saved this court judicial time. This stands as the primary mitigating factor in the present case. However, the aggravating features are exceptionally weighty. A life has been taken. The body was gruesomely mutilated. The remains were scattered. Significant portions remain missing. The accused profited from the deceased property, and there were sustained attempts to conceal evidence. The court must also recognize the profound and continuing suffering of the deceased family, who have been denied the most basic element of mourning, and that is the opportunity to lay their loved one to rest in full. The sanctity of human life and dignity of the human body, even after death, are fundamental values that the court must firmly uphold. While the accused is a first offender and has expressed remorse, these factors cannot eclipse the brutality of the conduct disclosed by the evidence. A sentence lacking a strong punitive element would fail to reflect the seriousness of the offense and would undermine public confidence in the administration of justice. Were it not for the plea of guilty entered by the accused, this court would have imposed the maximum sentence permitted by law, and that is death sentence. The court must, however, give way to the mitigating factor. The accused accepted responsibility by pleading guilty, thereby sparing the deceased family the ordeal of a lengthy trial and conserving judicial time. The court also notes that he is a first offender and has been in custody for a considerable period pending determination of this case. Notwithstanding the aforesaid factors, the gravity of the offense, the gruesome mutilation of the deceased body, and the need for deterrence, the community protection, however, demands a very substantial custodial sentence. The sentence must reflect the court's condemnation of the conduct and affirm the sanctity of human life and dignity owed to the dead. In the result, the accused, James Murithi Bugwa, is hereby sentenced to 40 years imprisonment. The sentence to run from January 10, 2022 being the date of his arrest in accordance with section 332 of the Criminal Procedure Code, and that is the judgment of the court.